Is it on now? Yes. Good.
So that's a good thing. Stay with the medicine, the dire need. There's nothing yesterday, no, but she was not, a week ago, she had a
All right. Your seats. Let's go ahead and get started. Yourself here. You can.
Yeah.
Okay. I know there must be a bunch of people at the game. Game tomorrow. Oh, the game's tomorrow. Oh, where are they then? Good question. All right. So listen, before we move on, I had a question about working the steps on things other than alcohol and drugs. And I just want to make clear what that's all about. Okay, that's about the first step. The first step is the only step that addresses the problem. So after you're done with the first step, whatever you're working the steps on is irrelevant. Steps 2 to 12 are the same as they've always been. They never change. Step 1 changes by what you're working the steps on. Alcohol, drugs, shopping, whatever. Fill in the blank. Um, no. We'll have to make copies if we need more. Um, so does everybody understand that? Does that make sense to you? So everything you're doing in steps 2, no, steps 2 to 12 is not about. Let's say you're working the steps on gambling. It's not about gambling. When you get to the fourth step, you're not working the fourth step on gambling. You're working the fourth step on the things that the book says to do. What we already talked about last week: resentments, fears, sexual conduct, harms to others, regardless of what you had on step 1. So the problem is addressed in the first step only, just like it is for alcohol or drugs. Does that make sense to everybody? Does anybody got any questions on that? Yep. Okay. The sheets are just handed out. Are just stuff to help you along. Uh, those are prompt sheets for fears and resentments, and that other sheet it just talks about the basic instincts of life that we discussed. So there's nothing we're going to use here. They're just for you to help you when you're trying to think on your fourth step. It's a prompt sheet. Okay. So last week we talked about the basic instincts of life. You remember that? Social instinct, the security instinct, the sexual instinct, right? And those are the things that God gave us for survival. Are you guys like with me today or what? I'm feeling like nobody's paying attention. People are talking. Yeah. I know you are. I'm, I'm looking around and people are like not paying attention. So anyway, the basic instincts is what God gave us to survive with, right? And these are the very things that uncontrolled that destroy us and rob us of any peace of mind serenity and happiness at all. Right? When we take these things way out into left field. So if you notice in the book and on your 4-step sheet, it says and the book talks about the ambitions too, right? So if you mess with one of my basic instincts or my ambition for that, I'll get just as mad as if you mess with that itself. You understand? So now a selfish, self-centered individual will always display the 3 wrongs that we talked about last week. Wrong judgment, wrong beliefs, wrong actions. And it's easy to spot these people because they're always madder than hell. Damn him, fuck her. I'll show them, they ain't gonna do me that way. A self-centered individual is always scared to death because they can't depend on God, they can't depend on other people, and they can't depend on themselves anymore. And the selfish, self-centered individual is always overdoing the 3 basic instincts of life. Always. So I think I mentioned last week that any problem you've ever had in your life or ever will have is a direct relation to your basic instincts. So that's why these things are important. Oh, by the way, did anybody spend any time looking or thinking about principles last week?
Tammy did.
What'd you come up with, Ken? Okay. Okay.
Don't
Okay.
tell anyone.
I had others too when I was a kid. I can't
Right after.
We pulled stuff up by our roots, right?
Yeah.
Lose your talent if you don't play in the church orchestra. Seriously.
That's a personal.
What was that? I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, you'll lose all your talents if you don't play in the church orchestra. You're in.
That would be a personal one. Yeah. But well, I'm glad you guys spent some time there. If you put them on your 4-step and inventory them, you're going to get some progress out of that. I promise you. So anyway, when we're talking about these basic instincts, a self-centered individual absolutely blocks himself off from having peace of mind, serenity, and happiness. And if we don't have any peace of mind, serenity, or happiness, then we'll always return to the booze or the dope to give it to us. And this is why I need to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. The basic instincts of life, they drive me to do the very things that cause me to be robbed of these peace of mind and all that stuff. You know. All right. I think we're on the bottom of page 64. We talked about resentments and we broke down the root origin of the word resentment. It means to feel again. You see in the bottom of page 64, it says, we listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. That would be column 1 on your sheets. We asked ourselves why we were angry. That would be column 2. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, that's column 3, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore. And then we give the example of how much you should write on your 4th step. It's right there on page 65. We're not writing life stories. We're not inventorying all your good qualities. It just makes no sense to do any of that. So Okay, we went bottom of page 65. We went back to our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought, top page 66, and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. So this is interesting now. Bill says it is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to fertility and happiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance and growth of his spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. Those are harsh words there. Very harsh words. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again, and with us to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for the alcoholics, these things were poison. Now he says, we turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We're prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. Let's talk about that. What is the entirely different angle? Huh? Your part? Okay.
Maybe that it doesn't matter what the other person did.
On the top of page 66, it says, to conclude others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. And then it tells us that we're going to look, that's what our column 5 is for. So after on the next page, it tells us to look at our part. What were you saying?
Like it doesn't, when we're looking at our part, that it doesn't matter what the other person did. It was our reaction to.
Okay. So a little bit of what both of you guys said is correct. But here's the entirely different angle. If you look in column 1, for instance, in column 1, I thought, because I didn't even know the word resentment when I got here. I didn't even know what that was about. And then I started writing, and I realized when you're done with column 1, you realize, damn, just look at how mad I am at the world, right? And then when you look at column 2, then you see. So let me share with you in column 1, on my first inventory that I did, I put Mary. That was my first wife. I put Mary. And in column 2, I put left me and took the kids. Right? Simple, sweet, quick. No, like. So column 1 was Mary. Column 2 was she left me and took the kids. What I realized when you're going through this stuff is it doesn't matter who was in column 1. If anybody would have left me and took my kids, I would have been mad at them. And then I look at what it affected in column 3, and then I look in column 4 what my part is and how I acted out on that in column 5. And I realized that, you know what? I wasn't faithful to her. I wasn't a good husband. I was never home. I was always out. I had girlfriends. Of course, she's going to leave me and take the kids. If I didn't do those things, she wouldn't have left me and took the kids. I know that. So, you get to work out these resentments as you go through these columns. But here's the entirely different angle. And this is what it says here. We go back and we look at it from an entirely different angle. The entirely different angle is this. It doesn't matter who it was in column 1. It doesn't matter what they did in column 2. It doesn't matter what it affected me in column 3, how it affected me. It doesn't even matter what my part was in column 4 or how I acted out on that in column 5. None of that matters. The entirely different angle is this. I have a resentment. It's eating my lunch, and I got to get rid of it. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That's the entirely different angle. Doesn't matter who it was. Doesn't matter what they did to me. Doesn't matter how it affected me. Doesn't matter what my part was. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is I have a resentment and it has to go. I got to get rid of it. Does that make sense to you? That's the different angle. Look what he said back on page 66. We turn back to the list. We're held the key to the future. We're prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominate us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, doesn't have to be real. It just has to be what I think. All right, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. Now, this was our course. We realized that people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. Now, here's the resentment prayer. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done. That's your resentment prayer. So when you come through and you go through all your columns and you go through a lot of the resentments you'll lose as you're inventorying them. Like I just described to you with Mary. When I realized that if I didn't do that, she wouldn't have done that, right? So I'm not resentful at her anymore. But at the end of this, the ones that you still have a resentment with, after you've inventoried, then you do this resentment prayer on them. Now, some people point out that the resentment prayer is back in the stories somewhere where they talk about praying for the person for 2 weeks or something, and that stuff. That is not the resentment prayer, people. That's just a story that's in the book. That is not the resentment prayer. And that actually came out in 1955 in the second edition. So when this book came out in 1939, from 1939 to 1955, they didn't have that. It was never the resentment prayer. It's just somebody's experience, and it helped them, and it might help you, and it might not. But it's not part of the steps, not part of the program.
I have a question.
Yes.
So then, when you're saying like the resentment prayer, we should just keep saying it over that person for how long? Till we don't have that resentment anymore?
Well, yeah. So let's say you have 2 resentments left at the end of your list, right?
Mhm.
So you get down on your knees and you talk to God. You do the resentment prayer on the first person. Then you do the resentment prayer in the second person. And then you go back and you talk to your sponsor and you look at your inventory that you did. Because sometimes when you go over with somebody else, you'll find something in there that maybe caused it. Maybe that you didn't see. So it helps to do that. And if you still have the resentment, the next day you do it again. You just do it until you don't have it no more.
Huh.
Well, if you get tired of doing it, then you might say, hey, let me get rid. You know what? Let me look at it from an entirely different angle. Let me get rid of this shit. Okay, so then on page 67, the second paragraph, so referring to our list again, putting out of our minds, the wrongs others has done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. That would be column 4 on your worksheet. And then, where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? That would be column 5. So where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. We saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly, and we're willing to set these matters straight. So that's what you're going to do. Now, I'm going to give you a mantra, and I'll repeat it so you'd have time to write it down, because it's important. I think you should write it down. Resentment comes from a harm to one of my basic instincts. Resentment comes from a harm to one of my basic instincts. I can't do anything about other people. Can't do anything about other people. Can't do anything about what other people do. But maybe with God's help, I cannot get angry. I won't get angry. If I'm not angry, then I have no resentment. If I have no resentment, I'm not blocked off from God. I'll do it again. But I think trying to do it slow, I think I left something out. But let me see. Resentment comes from a threat to any basic instinct. Can't do anything about other people. Can't do anything about what other people do. But maybe with God's help, I won't get mad. If I'm not mad, I'm not angry. If I'm not angry, I don't have no resentment. Because resentment is really undealt with anger, isn't it? That's all it is. So if I'm not mad, I don't have any anger. If I don't have any anger, I don't have any resentment. If I don't have any resentment, I'm not blocked off from God. And so that's something that it'd be well worth your while to learn that and get that in your head. And I'll tell you why. The next time you get angry, because we're going to be able to pinpoint the exact nature of our wrong. We're going to be able to see, and it's so perfect the way this works, where your anger stems from more than anything else when we go through this. And so when you get angry, you want to be able to say to yourself, I recognize that. I know it's going to happen. All right? If I don't get angry, with God's help, maybe I won't be mad. If I'm not mad, I'm not angry. If I'm not angry, I have no resentment. If I have no resentment, I'm not blocked off from God. And the same mantra goes for fear. Fear comes from a threat to any basic instinct. Can't do anything about people, other people. Can't do anything about what people do. But maybe with God's help, I won't be afraid. If I'm not afraid, I have no fear. If I have no fear, I'm not blocked off from God.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna give you an example because I want to get your opinion on this. So I have a person who continues to come up in multiple inventories. And it's not that I'm consistently mad, but right.
But you haven't been able to forgive.
Well, I don't, it's my mom. And it will be when she commits to something and I try to allow her space to do that. And then she's failing I don't know if it's like I'm putting this expectation because she says she's going to do it and then she doesn't do it. And then it hurts me, right? Because I've allowed her to try to do something, like give her space to do that.
Okay. That's a good question. That's a common problem that people have. And here's the answer to that. Very simple. When you don't accept people for who they are, you can only react to them.
Yeah.
Your only choice is to react to them. If you don't accept people for who they are, your only choice is to react to them.
And I don't lash out at her. Obviously, I just talk with a sponsor or a friend or whatever. But
Yeah. But you react to her inwardly.
yes.
You keep it in.
Yeah.
Because you're not accepting her for who she is.
But how do you try to allow people to grow to be a part of your life if
You allow them to do that by by understanding who she is.
Yeah.
And if once you understand who a person is, then you can't you won't react to them anymore. So you understand that she's somebody that doesn't. I don't know your mom just from what you said. She's somebody that never follows through with something, right?
It's a coin toss.
Right. So you don't do anything with her that you depending on her role because you understand who she is. And if she comes through on something, it's a bonus because you're not depending on that. So if you don't accept people for who they are, the only thing you can do is react to them. You cannot respond to them. You cannot deal with them in a way. And because it's your mom, you put it inward and it builds up, it builds up. And we talked about it last week. When you suppress feelings and emotions, this shit comes out sideways. You know, you may be talking to somebody else and they may say, and you will, well, fuck you. You know, wait a minute. That was, you know, 2 weeks of dealing with your mom that you pent up. It wasn't this person, but it came in. Yeah. So, yeah, it's very necessary for you to learn how to accept people for who they are. So, and this mantra will help you understand when you get angry and when you get afraid. Okay. Okay. So, is there any questions on resentments? Any questions? Yeah, Jeff? Yeah.
I had resentment against my sister, not afraid, not afraid, not afraid. I never could shake it. The way I got rid of it finally was always say my losing. I tried, I didn't remember her until my knees were wore out. Basically. But I finally got rid of it after I made my mentor. Wound up, I was mad at her for her letting me with her off.
Yeah, that's how warped we are.
Yeah.
We're not talking cured here. So yeah, I think we talked. I think I told you about Norm Alpe, right? The guy that his pitch was inches and seconds. Yeah. So that's a perfect example of how we deal with people, right? Is when anything happens, it's right on me all the time, and I just got to get it off of me. And inches and seconds and recovery allows you to take a look at it and not react, but rather respond to life, whatever the situation is. Okay. So yes.
I'm not giving any context, so that maybe makes it a little bit of a weird question because it conjure up a lot of hypotheticals. But when working with sponsors before, so I've had sponsors before, and then I've gotten a lot more trouble after going back to drinking. This paragraph has caused a lot of problems, and it's the one on page 66 that you went over on the entirely different angle. I read that and I thought that I have to be prepared to look at what the other guy did from an entirely different angle. It doesn't mean that I'm actually going to take the other guy's side.
Who told you that? Is that what somebody taught you?
Well, I'm asking you. Like when I read it,
No.
I've got to be prepared.
The book answers that question right there. Just keep reading. What does it tell you? Or right above that, it tells you that it's not about the other person. It's about you. It's your inventory.
And then the resentment has to be mastered, but that doesn't mean to me that the resentment should just go away. But it sounds like you were saying, keep praying, it'll go away. What if I just have to live with it? And it doesn't go away, but I can live with it. It won't master me, dominate me, and kill me. Right? Does the end point have
So
to
you
be
think.
truly getting rid of resentment?
So you think. Yeah. If you got a resentment, it masters you're under its spell. You may think you could live with it, and you probably can live with it, but you have ramifications you're not even aware of. Resentments are killers. They have to go. The book says they're fatal. Fatal means they'll kill us. So if you have a resentment against somebody, it's got to go. You have to work on it and ask God to help you until it is gone. And like most of your resentments are gone just going through the inventory process. And you still have a couple of stubborn ones left. You do the resentment prayer, you ask God, you work with your sponsor, and you go over to work there. And please, can you get me coffee, please? Thank you. So yeah, but you're wrong, even thinking about the other person and to the extent of what did they do on the resentment. That's irrelevant. Totally irrelevant. Okay, this is your inventory. It's about you, not about them.
Fear.
Oh,
I use fear for, I use it in the
and the resentment thing.
and resentment too, to ask God to remove it and direct my attention to what He had me be.
Yeah, we're gonna go over that. We're gonna get to that now, and if when we go over that, if it's something that you can help you with, that'd be good.
Quick question. You know, when we do the columns, we do them 1 all the way down, 2 all the way down, 3 all the way down. Now, when we are going through our brains and thinking of people or places we resent, we're thinking of what it is they did.
Right.
We're not thinking, why wouldn't I write the person in a quick little thing in column 2, and then the other ones, you know, I know it says to go vertically one at
Yeah.
a time.
I mean,
Does it
the
matter?
bottom line is, it's not like there's a penalty that
Okay.
if you have to do it that way, go ahead. But what happens is you wind up changing your mind doing it that way. You wind up thinking about it too much and changing your mind. The other way is easy. Who I'm mad at, and you just write their names down, and then if you don't need to spend an hour or a month or 10 minutes thinking about who else am I mad at. If you can't think of who you're mad at, you're not mad at them. So you don't bother with it on column 1. Then column 2 is easy because, like you already said, Karen, if you wrote their name down, you know why you're mad at them. And so if you do it left to right, you wind up changing your mind more often than it gets a little more drawn out. But the bottom line is, if that's going to help you do it, just do it that way. Yeah, it's more efficient to go top to bottom than left to right. 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 Yeah. Yeah. The directions are on the 4th sheet, and it tells you right top to bottom. So you start on column 1, you just write down who you're mad at. Well, just the names in column 1, what they did in column 2, how it affected you in column 3. Now, here's something that you need to know. Column 4 is your part in that. And sometimes in life, we really don't have a part. Some people hurt us or did something to us. And there are times in life where we've been or you've been a victim. And so if you can honestly say that you had no part in this resentment with this person, do not leave column 4 blank. Do not leave column 4 blank. If you can honestly say you had no part in it, then I want you to write down how you acted and reacted to what they did to you. In column 4. So don't leave any columns blank.
Say that again on column 4.
Column 4, if you can honestly say you had no part in it, you didn't play any part in it. Like, for instance, on column 1 was Mary with me, and then when I got to column 4, well, I was cheating on her every week. I was never home. I wasn't a good husband. That's what I did. But if I could say I didn't do anything, I was a good husband. I was always there, and she left me and took the kids. That may be the case for somebody. It wasn't the case for me. It may be the case for somebody, right? if you had no part in column 4 to write down, then I want you to write down how you acted and reacted to what they did to you. So do not leave column 4 blank.
That would be a parent-child.
No,
Like sexual
any situ, I was just giving you an
abuse.
example. It could be any situation. Well, if you have a resentment on it, it needs to be inventoried. Yeah. If you have a resentment, now, if you had no part on what they did to you, then how did you act and react to it? So something goes in column 4. Then column 5 is how you acted out on that. Okay? So that is your sheets. That's your resentment sheets. When we get done with all 4 sheets, I'm going to go back and show you how to analyze these things. And the way we analyze these things, I promise you, you'll be able to exactly pinpoint where your anger stems from, where your fear stems from, where your sexual deviation stems from, and why you hurt people, the way you hurt people. Okay. So, yes.
Back to principles.
Okay.
Would you say principle?
Would I say there's something as good, such as good principles? Yes, absolutely. A principle is a moral, a value, or a belief. So yes, you have good morals, you have good values, and you have good beliefs, but you don't need to inventory them. We're not inventorying any good stuff. There's no reason for it. We're looking for our wrongs, our flaws. We're not looking for our good conduct and our good character. It's just a waste of time. So, but absolutely, to answer your question, yes, there are just as many good principles as there are bad ones. But we're not going to inventory them.
Say something that makes me afraid. Don't.
And your fear list? And your resentment list? What? On the fears, we're going to read it now. The fears that you're going to put down where you have a fear with no resentment in connection to it. Okay? So it's just the fear. Now, so since we're talking about fears, here's an interesting fact for you. Every child in the world is born with 2 fears. God instills 2 fears in every child. I don't know if you knew that. The 2 fears are this. Every child is born with the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. Those 2 things they're born with these 2 things. Every child is born with the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. If you go in front of a little infant and you bang your hands or something, they'll jump and shit. Or if you go like that with them, they'll they may like it after you keep doing it, but original. So every child is born with the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you something very interesting. What? Well, God gives those fears, right? So it tells you 2 things. That first of all, there's nothing wrong with fear. Fear is a good thing if used properly, because if you use properly, fear will warn you of danger. If you use it properly, only the problem is we don't use shit properly, right? So, but here's what it tells you. If each child is born with the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling, then it tells you this. Every other fear is learned as you grow up. God didn't give it to you like that. God, you weren't born with the fear of this or the fear of that or the fear. You weren't born with those things. You developed them yourself. Very interesting.
Where did you get that?
Yes.
I mean, if you ask me, I'm asking you. Told you that.
I don't remember. It's been a very long time ago. It's in my research. and in my study of this program, you know, I'm a little anal retentive where I could sit down for hours and go through the books and look up every word I don't know and research things and where did this come from, where did that come from, and searching fears and stuff. That's what I came up with. Don't remember where, when, long time ago. Okay. And here's something else that I don't remember where it came from. Okay. These are the fear elements, 4 basic traits of all alcoholics. 4 basic traits of all alcoholics. You want to write this down? All alcoholics are ultra sensitive. It's ultra sensitivity. Ultra childishness. Look, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Ultra egocentricity. And ultra grandiosity. Now, those are 4 elements of fear. They're fear elements, and they're 4 basic traits of all alcoholics. Because umbrellaed under all of that, under those 4 things, is all the kind of stuff that we know about: irritability, defiance, pouting, arrogant, arguing, loneliness, depression, elation, aggressive, stubborn, determination, dishonesty, nervousness, restlessness, frustration, selfishness. All of these things manifest, they stem from the fear elements, those 4 things. Yeah. Ultra sensitivity, ultra childishness, ultra egocentricity, ultra grandiosity. Huh?
Ultra ego. Say ego.
Egocentricity. And then grandiosity. Okay, so when we're talking about fear now, we're talking about the next manifestation of self, or the next condition of the cause. Remember, I told you those are the same things: condition of the cause and the manifestation of self. So, fear brings caution if used correctly and keeps me from getting hurt. But just like everything else, we take shit way out into left field, right? You know, when we went over the 3 basic instincts of life, we talked about why God gave them to us. And then we talked about how we warped them and used them wrongly, right? And well, the same thing here goes in. So there's, when you talk about fear, there's usually a few things that we're talking about. Fear of not getting what we think we deserve, fear of losing something we think we have, and what are they going to do when they find out what I did? Those are your most common fears. But the idea is really simple when it comes to fear. It's without God, I fear, fill in the blank. With God, I have no fear. So let's go back to page 68. Some people come up with the idea of everything is about fear of living or fear of dying. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. Like, if you give me any fear that you could give me, I'll tell you if it's a fear of living or fear of dying. So they umbrella that on under those two fears, but really, you could just say that without God, I fear whatever. So on page 68 it says, we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. Okay? We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Page 68. First paragraph. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so. For we're now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We're in the world to play the role He assigns. Just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. And we already told you that's the third step promises there. But now, let's go back and look at what this says here. We asked ourselves why we had these. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Does anybody not understand what self-reliance is? Everybody understands self-reliance?
Like our own will.
No, it's
Playing God.
huh? It doesn't necessarily mean playing God. It just, in a sense, yes, Mike, but it doesn't have to go that far. It just means just exactly what it says. Relying on self. Self-reliance. You know, I have a whole room full of people I could rely on. I have a whole network of friends and family that I could rely on. I have a God I could rely on. I've got 12 steps I could rely on. I've got, there's lots of things for me to rely on. But when I rely on myself, the book says self-reliance failed us. Now let's look at the next paragraph. This is why it fails us. For we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. There you go. That's the answer. Does everybody understand the word infinite?
Never.
Infinite cannot be measured. There is no beginning and no end. It's infinite.
To infinity and beyond.
To infinity and beyond. But look what it says. We trust infinite God rather than our finite self. You know what finite means? Huh? No, finite doesn't mean tiny. Finite means that there's a beginning and an end. It can be measured. It could be large. It could be, in some areas of our life, some of us excel way more than others in certain areas, but it's still finite. It's still measurable. There's still a beginning and an end to whatever we're able of doing and being. And that's why when we rely on self, it fails us because we're finite. People like us always exceed the boundaries of what we're able to do and be. Does that make sense to you? But when we incorporate God, we trust infinite God. There is no beginning and there is no end. There's nothing that God can't handle. When I incorporate God into my life, I have no fear. And I don't fail. But when I rely on myself, I fail. And when I rely on myself, I'm consumed with fear. So now he says, the next paragraph, he said, we never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality is the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it's the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. And this is your fear prayer. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. That's your fear prayer. Now, if we put all of this together and look at it, it starts making a lot of sense. I'll give you an example. When I got sober, I'm born and raised in New York City. I'm born and raised in the Bronx, but I have a fear of heights. And, you know, I grew up where we had parties on the roof. We had, you know, birthday parties and confirmations and all this stuff on, you know, dance parties, everything up on top of the roof. That was fine with me. I just don't want to go over to the end and look out. I don't like that. So when I got sober, that was my biggest fear, was heights. Now, where I come from, all the buildings are 6 stories high in the neighborhood. They're brownstones. They're 6-story high. Some guys in my in my group helped me with this, and we went over in the neighborhood and put a ladder up on the side of the building, and there was 2 guys up on the roof, and they said, "Okay, Dan, climb up the ladder." Now I'm telling you, when I get like 3 or 4 steps up the ladder, the whole friggin' ladder's shaking. Somebody got to hold that because I'll shake it right off of the building. But back earlier in the program, it asked us a question that, is God everything or is he nothing? And everybody says God is everything. Well, the truth is, if God is everything, and you believe God is everything, why are you living the way you're living? Why are you acting the way you're acting if God is everything? If God is everything, prove it. And over here it tells me that I trust my God. I let him demonstrate through me what he can do. I ask him to remove my fear and direct my attention to what he would have me be. And at once, I commence to outgrow fear. So, I'm at the bottom of the building, and they ask me, Dan, he's got everything or he's nothing? God's everything. Well, act like he is. Go up the damn ladder. And I go, well, okay. I ask God to remove my fear and direct my attention would have me be. And I start climbing the ladder. And I get up to the top. It was a little scary throwing my foot up there and getting onto the building, but I did it. And I start walking to the door to go down the steps. I don't know, Dan, no. You gotta go down the ladder. And no, I can't do that. I can't go down. I can't throw my leg over the building and onto the step of the ladder. I can't do it. What do you mean you can't do it? Is God everything or is he nothing? I said he's everything. They said, well, why don't you act like it then? Ask God to remove your fear. He's gonna at once direct your attention when he would have you be. And you're gonna out. So I did that. And it took me about 15 minutes to throw my leg over and find the rung of the ladder. And I did. And I climbed down the ladder. And when I got to the bottom, back to the sidewalk, did I overcome my fear of heights? No. No. But I asked God, infinite God, to help me. And I was able to go up and down the ladder. Today, 34 years later, I could climb a ladder today without it shaking like crazy. Now, if I don't have to climb the ladder, I won't climb the ladder. If I could find somebody else to climb the ladder, I'll have them climb the ladder. But if I have to climb a ladder today, I could climb a ladder, no problem. Okay? I still don't like heights, but I can deal with it today. This is what we're talking about here, okay? With God, I have no fear. Without God, my self-reliance always fails me because I always exceed the limits of what I'm able to do and be. And that's what they're talking about here on this page. And we always do that. Now, I said with the resentments, but the same with the fears. I can't experience fear unless there's a threat to any of my basic instincts of life or my ambitions of that. It's the same thing. If I wasn't such a frightened individual to begin with, I wouldn't experience so much fear. If I was more considerate towards people and institutions, I wouldn't be doing the things that cause them to come after me and retaliate and hurt me, right? So I have to realize that stuff, that I have a part to play even in my fears. And what Levi was saying, maybe this fear prayer will help you in your resentments. And it very well may. And now you have a resentment prayer and a fear prayer that you can throw at this stuff. So it's important. So anybody got any questions on fear?
So, wait, for clarification, it's okay to live with fear. So it doesn't dominate me and kill me, but it's not okay to live with resentment. That has to go away altogether. Fear doesn't have to go away altogether. So you have a different attitude or threshold for how to deal with fear as opposed to that. Am I right?
I don't know if it's a different threshold. I think it's nice to be able to be without fear and without resentment. Why is that? Is that not possible?
I don't think so.
Well, that's because you have some fear and you have some resentments. I don't have either right this moment in time.
But sometimes they come back. I mean, you-
Sometimes they come back. Yes, absolutely. And maybe more so with fear than with resentment. The fear might come back again and again, but well, yeah, that's why originally God instilled the fear thing in us because fear warns us of danger. So fear by itself is not bad. When it runs our life and controls us, then it's bad. But to answer your question, you can absolutely live without fear and without resentment. Listen, if you're in this program and you're 20 years sober, right, and you're consumed by fear and you're consumed by resentments, the fuck have you been doing for 20 years? You haven't been doing shit. You haven't been doing this program because this program relieves you of that stuff. It takes that away from you. So if you have that, when I was in Florida, I was a speaker meeting and this lady was up there. I don't remember, she had 12 or 15 years sober. And in Florida, the supermarkets there have wine. They have an aisle of, it's all wine. You go, like cereal in one aisle and wine in the next aisle. And she was sharing that she skips that aisle. She can't go down that aisle. And I had a sponsee with me. And afterwards he said to me, man, he says, I understand what she's talking about. I can't go through. And he's 3 months sober. She's 12 years sober, or whatever she was. I said, listen, trust me when I tell you, you don't want a damn thing she's got. Because she ain't got no program. If she's 12 years sober, she can't roll a cart down the friggin' aisle. That's something you want to make sure you ain't. So what I'm saying is if you're sticking around and you're doing this deal, you shouldn't be consumed by fear and consumed by resentments, but anybody else got a question? You worked the steps 25 years ago. Okay. All right. Yeah. Anybody got a real question I should ask? Nicole? The fourth step ones, yes. The fourth step ones, yes.
I need 4.
You need 4. There's 1.
This is
2.
4.
4 of them is 1.
Okay, well, these are all the.
No, honey, they're all different. Fears, resentments, sexual conduct, and harms to others. 4 of them make 1. There's 2. How many you need? There's 3. Four.
Thank you, sir.
All right. You need one too?